We're in Proverbs this morning. One Sunday to cover the Proverbs. It's always difficult, but there's choices to be made as we look at these books, and I encourage you to read them, because the things I say in a brief half an hour here is certainly not adequate to any of these books, but I hope to provide a way in, a way that you can organize your thoughts as you read some of these places and understand how to interact with this material. Proverbs have a way of kind of getting stuck with us, and I appreciate you, Derek, for just pondering a little bit what it means to stand in front of people and speak. I appreciate those words and resonate with many of the things you said. That little proverb you read, it sticks with me. Where there are many words, sin is not absent. It's frequent after standing here for a few minutes that confession is necessary. You listen to my words, but there's, I don't think, hardly a Sunday where there's not something that requires further pondering afterwards. So we need to be careful with our words, as the Proverbs tell us. But I'm not going to focus on that part of it, because we get bogged down if we get into the individual Proverbs. But I want to instead introduce you this morning to a fine lady. This woman calls out to every one of us. She is eternal. She is both young and attractive, and old and wrinkled and wise. Because she is eternal, she is more beautiful than all other things in the heavens and the earth. She is simple, in that even the children who've gone downstairs can gain wisdom from her, read her words, and gain knowledge. But she is deep. If we ponder and chew on her words, her presence, and dedicate ourselves to this project, to this idea, we will never plumb the depths of what she can give us. She is easy to live with, and she brings great joy. I hope you can say that, men, about your wives. But her path is narrow and only open to those who will pursue no other. You know who I'm speaking of, because our Bibles are open to Proverbs. It's Lady Wisdom, the woman who is introduced to us in these passages and calls out to us for us to pursue her in our lives. Our key passages are kind of focused on that part of the Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 1 is the invitation. Proverbs chapter 8 we're going to spend a little bit of time on. And Proverbs chapter 31, the last part of the chapter, is again Lady Wisdom there. And so that's where I'm going to spend my time, in those three passages. And in between all of those passages is the rest of the Proverbs. So I'm going to seek to give you a way in, an introduction to how to read and how to interact with Proverbs, how to meet God in these places. And then I'll leave that up to you to go and do it. Proverbs 1 and the last part of chapter 31 are like bookends. Bookends, and the Proverbs stand in between them. And these bookends give us a poetic description of a woman. I don't know if wisdom need always be depicted in the feminine. Maybe it's just an accident of language. If any of you have gone to Quebec or Mexico and tried to speak in a different language than English, you soon come to understand, for us English speakers, the difficult concept that all words have gender. In many other languages, all words have gender. It doesn't mean that the dog is male or female, it just means that the word has a gender. And that's the case in the biblical Hebrew, and the word wisdom is a feminine word. And so that might be why wisdom is depicted as a woman, but I think it's deeper than that, because I think it also describes something of the feminine side of God, because God is normally depicted or addressed as a he, as a man, as a father, but God, of course, has no gender in the same sense that we understand it. And so I think in Proverbs we have God depicted in the feminine as a broader understanding of who God is. But these bookends, they're worth paying attention to, because they introduce us to the Proverbs and they close them out. In Proverbs chapter 1, we have an address that is really quite specifically to young men. Now, I think it's addressed to all of us, but in a particular way, it's a call to young men. And it's Lady Wisdom calling out and inviting men to pursue her. Above all other things, above all other passions, to pursue her and her alone. And it's a very attractive proposal. I'll read you one rendition of it. Throughout chapter 1 and parts of chapter 2, it comes in various different forms. But in the end of chapter 1, it goes like this. Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the walls, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? Repent at my rebuke. Then I will pour out my thoughts to you. I will make known to you my teachings. Now you can read chapter 1 and 2, particularly chapter 1, and see different expressions of this call. But it's a call to repent. A call to turn from things like simple ways. Simple ways would be things like seeking something that's pleasurable right now at the expense of long-term success. That's a simple way. It's a call to put aside mockery. And mockery is so often an attempt to make myself look good by putting others down. And it's a call to turn from folly. Instead, to seek knowledge and understanding and to listen to the teachings. Who will pursue the way of wisdom? Who will pursue this woman with all their heart? Chapter 31, on the other hand, is a description of a woman. Now, very often chapter 31 of Proverbs is used to make women feel guilty about how inadequate they are. I don't think that's the right way to read it. It certainly can have that effect. I think it's something different. In the context of Proverbs, with chapter 1 as this call to men to pursue wisdom, I think in chapter 31, verse 10 and following, we have the call to women to pursue wisdom. It's a different call. It's a different motivation. But when we read the description of this woman, we have in a sense, the incarnation of wisdom. If you put into practice all of these proverbs and lived wisely, what would a life look like? And when God describes that life that is instructed by wisdom, he doesn't describe a man. He describes a woman. And the overall implication of this is that it's an invitation to a life that brings satisfaction, fullness, and security. Not drawn from other people and places, but just from the quality of the life lived. And I think that's a call. I mean, I've never been a woman, but I think that's a call that's attractive to women. You can correct me afterwards if I'm wrong. For men, it's the call to pursue a lover who is wisdom. To women, it's a call to pursue a life that produces security and fullness and satisfaction in and of itself, in the quality of the life, in the quality of the character. So I think the bookends here in Proverbs are these two things. Let's just listen to the last words of that description of the wise woman. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gates. And there we have the bookends, the invitation. Here stands before you a woman, and she is wise, and she calls out to us to live in a certain way, to live life with a certain attitude. And that's what we want to get at in chapter 8. The third key passage, chapter 8, describes wisdom not as a woman here, but in a different way. And to introduce that, I made an attempt to summarize what it says. I got some other Proverbs in here. We'll go there. My bullet points are mixed up too this morning, but we'll give some examples before we go into chapter 8. I think we have time for that. Proverbs 27. I picked a few that are kind of funny or interesting, but if you wake up your friend in the early morning and shout, "Rise and shine," it will sound to him more like a curse than a blessing. It's simple, right? We all get it. And it's true. Any one of the children downstairs who has siblings could read that and be wiser, have better relationship with their brother or sister. But if you were to take that proverb in the morning and just chew on it all day long, it would bear different kinds of fruit for each one of us. It might tell the woman who's thinking of going off birth control to approach her husband in a certain way rather than just blurt it out with a pregnancy test. It might tell the boss who's thinking of completely reorganizing the way the company is structured to not just make all the decisions and then blurt it out to cause everyone to fear and tremble, but to start talking about it and work his way into it so people come on board. And we could go on. Every one of your lives has different issues, but if you were to just chew on a simple saying like that all day long, it would bear fruit in many different ways. Or we could look at Proverbs 17:28. Even fools are thought wise when they keep silent. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent. It seems like an invitation to deception, because who of us is truly intelligent? But here's a way to fool everybody. But just try it sometime. While everyone else is arguing, everyone else is going on, everyone else is spouting off, just stay quiet. Something strange will happen as you listen to everyone else. When the words are finally done and they say, "Well, you never said anything, what do you think?" You'll probably actually have something intelligent to say because you were listening to everything else. We could run down that trail in every one of our lives, and it would bring fruit deeper and deeper and deeper into our lives. Simple on the surface. But here's another one. Children love it. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his foolishness. I guess we don't have the children up here. There'd be a lot of laughter right now. What does that even mean? I was reviewing that this morning, and I was thinking about yesterday. And yesterday we took the dog for a long walk and went downtown and did some Christmas shopping. And my back hurts today. And why is that? Because I put on a certain pair of boots, and guess what? I know that those boots make my back hurt if I walk on them for long. So I'm just like that dog. Why did I do that? That was foolish. And that's fairly trivial, but it's true. But that got me thinking as I was approaching home with my sore back yesterday. You know, there's certain phrases and things that I say. I know they upset my family. I know they come across the wrong way. It's just the other day I said it again. Just like a dog returning to its vomit. Why would I still do that when I know it? When I have the experience? And so a proverb like this can work its way into our lives. Little by little, bit by bit. Starts out simple and maybe even a little humorous. But it bears fruit if we chew on it. If we work on it. So that kind of gives you a hint into the Proverbs, but I want to go back to our summary now, and this is the statement I came up with. In Proverbs, God says, I have woven my ways into the fabric of all things. Wise is the one who answers my invitation to find me there. God is present in everything. He created it. In some way or another, He's there. And we can find Him. We can find Him if we search for Him there. That's a single sentence. I want to give you that here in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 8. I'm going to read the whole chapter. I think it's worth listening to. It's worth reading. If you have a Bible, open it up on your phone or wherever. And you might have a different translation, but the meanings will follow along as I go. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding rise her voice? At the highest point along the way, where the paths meet, she takes her stand beside the gate leading into the city at the entrance, and she cries aloud. To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You who are simple, gain prudence. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. Listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true, for my lips detect wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them are crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me kings reign and rulers issue decrees that are just. By me princes govern and nobles, all who rule the earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me, and making their treasuries full. The Lord brought me forth as the first of his words, before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be. When there were no oceans, I was given birth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains were settled into place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the world, or its fields, or any of the dust of the earth, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizons on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundaries so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. Wisdom, God says in Proverbs, I have woven my ways into the fabric of all things. Wise is the one who answers my invitation to find me there. The idea here is that God is present. God can be found wherever you look in all that he has made. Wisdom was there with God at the beginning, and God wove her in through everything. And there's a way of knowing God. There's a way of pursuing God that doesn't involve dreams and visions and prophecies and miracles. Those things exist and they're important. But there's another way of engaging the relationship. And it's through what God has made. Wisdom is God, and God is wisdom. Wise are the ones who seek him at all times, in all things. The refrain of Proverbs, if there is a refrain, is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. In fact, instead of this funny sentence I put up here, that's probably what I should have put. In Proverbs, God says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But you've heard that many times. So I tried to use some different words to say the same thing. What it means is this. Those who live their life, all of life, every bit of it, in reference to God, are wise. Those who live all of their life, or part of it, without reference to God, are fools. Because God is present in all things. And if you try to live your economic life, your relationship with money, without reference to God, you're a fool. There are certain principles that God put in place in the world that will knock you down if you don't follow them. If you try to live your relationships without reference to God, you're a fool. Because there's certain things that God has put in men and women that are of his character and his nature. You be wise to search them out and seek them and find them and live according to them. Then you will not only find a relationship with the people around you, but through them you will find a relationship with God. You be a fool to plant your seed in fall and try to harvest in spring. Because God put a pattern in place. And the wise person finds it and seeks it out and follows it. We could go on and on with the examples, but I want to ask you this question. As I was reading from Proverbs chapter 8, were any of you reminded of a passage in the New Testament in the Gospels? The description here of wisdom with God in creation is almost identical to this description in John chapter 1 of Jesus Christ with God at the time of creation. We can go through the New Testament, and that would be a great sermon for another time, but let me just read you one other place. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 25. It talks about the wise and the foolish. This foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans. You see how that's another way of saying the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom? Even the wisest plans that people make without reference to God are foolish compared to the foolish things that are done in reference to God. This foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. Remember, dear brothers and sisters, that few of you are wise in the world's eyes, or powerful, or wealthy when God called you. Instead, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And He chose things that are powerless to shame those who are powerful. God chose things despised by the world, things counted as nothing at all, and used them to bring to nothing what the world considers important. As a result, no one can ever boast in the presence of God. God has united you with Christ Jesus. For our benefit, God made Him to be wisdom itself. Who is wisdom? Jesus Christ. Christ made us right with God. He made us pure and holy, and He freed us from sin. Therefore, as the Scripture says, if you want to boast, boast only about the Lord. There's so many threads we could tie together as we look at the New Testament's description of Jesus and the Old Testament's description of wisdom, and there's a tight connection there. When we pursue wisdom, it's not just a frivolous activity. We're looking for God in the things He made. We sometimes compare our spiritual journey with those of others. And if you're a person who primarily encounters God in His creation, you might feel you're not as spiritual as someone who has dreams and visions and prays and miracles happen. They're both there in the Scriptures as legitimate, real, proper ways to pursue a relationship with God. One's not better than the other. They're parts of the same thing. Fear the Lord. Submit to His ways. We do it every day when we walk around. We submit to His way, which is called gravity. And we can just go on from there through creation and find Him wherever we go. Some of it we call science. Some of it we call morality. Some of it we call good common sense. We're just seeking to know God in all of these things. Wisdom explores how we live well in God's world. See, the law tells us what's right and wrong. The prophets call us to a better life. But the Proverbs speak to us about possibilities. They're not promises. Just because you live this way, I mean, just because you're silent, as we read earlier, doesn't mean that everyone's going to think you're intelligent. It's a probability. There's a good chance people will. But sometimes they won't. Just because you work hard like an ant and save up little by little doesn't mean you end up with lots of money. Usually it works out that way. But sometimes, as the other proverb says, like eagle's wings, your wealth is just flown away. And we go through all the Proverbs in that way. They're probabilities, not promises. They're not guarantees, they're general rules. There's always exceptions. But they're guides to living wisely in God's world. An invitation to pursue God, to know God in all of His world and all of His ways. I want to close with some Proverbs of my own. I haven't written them yet, but following the way of wisdom, I think sometimes it invites us into a way of engaging, a way of interacting with the world that bears fruit and helps us to know one another, know ourselves, and know God. First one is like this. I worked for about 7 years as a carpenter. And I still remember after I got past the stage where the crew made me carry all the wood to all the real carpenters, and I got to handle a saw and a hammer. My crew foreman, we were building a house, and he showed me how to put up some bracing, some cross bracing in the structure. And so I started working at it, and I went around and I was doing this cross bracing, and then after 20 or 30 minutes, he came by to check on my work, and he made sure he had a big hammer in his hand. And as he went along, he said, okay, that one looks good, that one looks good. Then the next one, he just knocked it right out of the house. Well, what's wrong? It looked just like the other ones. And he showed me, no, that cross brace has a big knot in the middle of it. It's not strong. It's going to break. When the snow lands on the roof, puts pressure there, it's going to break. It's not a strong piece of wood. It's just a small part of it. But if you work with wood, maybe some of you do in your garage or for a living, you soon learn certain things. You learn that you're better off to work with the grain. All wood has a grain, and it's stronger in one direction than the other. It's easier to cut in one direction than the other. And if you learn to work with the grain, your work will go smoother, and your results will be more beautiful and stronger. You'll also soon learn, as I did on the job site that day, that every piece of wood has imperfections in it. You can ignore that, and your work will be weaker. You can just cut them out and put them on the burn pile. But if you're a skilled carpenter, you soon learn that if you take those knots and those imperfect places, and you carefully put them in the right place on the piece of furniture, you don't make the furniture weaker, but you make it more beautiful. The imperfections make it more beautiful, more interesting to look at if they're handled wisely. And if this carpenter then comes home after learning these things in the wood shop, and he starts to notice that each of his children have a different grain, a different pattern, a different direction. And instead of fighting against that and constantly trying to mold them all into his shape with a hammer, working alongside that grain, the cuts will be easier. They won't hurt as much. And even his wife has imperfections. He can try to knock them out, throw them on the garbage heap. But if he's skilled, like he's learned to be in the carpentry shop, those things can become the most beautiful parts of their relationship, of their family. On display for all the world. As Proverbs says at the end, she will be praised at the city gates. And if the carpenter does these things, he will soon understand that God makes everything according to a purpose and a plan. From the piece of wood in his hand that he's trying to fashion into a chair, to the children in his home, and the people he works alongside, and the wife he shares a life with. Both the grain and the beauty and the imperfections, they're all there to be worked with, to be honed, to be carefully sanded and moved until they're perfect and beautiful. And when he does that, he will know God. He will honor God in his work, in every way, in every place. So I don't know, maybe some of you are poets who could write that into a proverb. But that's what it means to diligently seek out God in all that he has made. I remember another time when I first moved to the coast and started to learn about tides. Tides produce beautiful things, but they're dangerous. If you get caught out on a rock and the tide comes in, you're going to have to swim. But you walk on the beach and you soon see that there's things that you start picking out little pieces of glass that have been broken apart and sanded clean, and they're like jewels on the beach. And from those tiny things to the big things, you go to another place where there's cliff and sandstone on the coast, and just intricate carvings of beauty in the rock. The tides continually pressing up against those rocks and making them exquisite. And if you think about that, and if you allow yourself to live in the fear of God, you soon start to realize that God's character is on display. At first it comes as a recognition of the beauty of His creation, and you worship Him for His beauty. But as you sit there on the rock and look at the patterns, you soon learn that there's so much more to it than that. The rock looks so much stronger than the waves. And yet with slow, persistent work, the waves have turned the rock into beauty. And they've taken away the parts that are softer and left the parts that are harder. And you start to think about the waves that hit your life. You think, well, maybe God's like an ocean. And I defiantly stand in His way, but He persistently and slowly, and He goes out and leaves me alone and comes back and works a bit more and goes out and leaves me alone. And sometimes I think He's far away and distant and has nothing to do with me. And then He comes back like the tide. And over time, if I submit to Him, maybe there can be beauty in my life too, like in those rocks. So there's a proverb. There's a way of looking at the world and seeking, I know God's in there. He's woven Himself and His character and His ways into everything. And so we pursue wisdom at all times, and it brings us into relationship with God. Just the other day, as I said, I sit on the board of directors of the Evangelical Free Church of Canada. And I was at a board meeting, and they gave me a stack of papers. I was supposed to have read them all before, and in fact I had. But they gave us fresh copies so we all had the same thing and could look at the same page at the same time. And on this stack of papers there was a paper clip. And it was clipped over, holding them all together. And we were supposed to turn to one of the reports in a particular page, and I couldn't get that paper clip off. It was kind of stuck there, and it just occurred to me in passing. I couldn't think about it long because the meeting was going on, but the thought was, the paper clip is so small and weak, and yet it's defying my efforts in holding this big heavy stack of papers together, even though I want them to come apart. I was reminded of that later on when I went to the massage. Had some tension, went to the massage to get it worked out of my back, and I realized, I can ask people I know to give me a back rub, and it feels good, but it doesn't really get it. But I go to the massage, and she knows just where to put the pressure and how long to hold it. Just like that paper clip. It's not really very strong, but the pressure's in just the right place, and it can hold a big stack of paper together. And that got me thinking. That got me thinking about other things, like temptation, and like my character, and like God. And how I can live for years without noticing, and all of a sudden He puts the pressure on a certain spot. He knows just when and where. It's not too much to break me, but it's just the right pressure to make me realize I've got to make a change there. And then I know God better because of a paper clip. He's everywhere. He's calling out to you. And He says, put aside other pursuits. Fear the Lord, not just when you read the Bible or come to church, but even when you take a paper clip off a stack of papers. Do that simple task, in reference to God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. if you search for him, you will find him. Every day, in everything. It's simple. But you can push to the depths of wisdom for the rest of your life and never find the end. He has put himself woven into the fabric of everything that exists. And he's given us the invitation in Proverbs to relate to him out there. He's given us the invitation to stop thinking of these things as spiritual things I do and these things as just normal, everyday, ordinary things I do. And his invitation is find the way to make that one thing. No part of your life outside of the pursuit of your relationship with God. That's what it means to say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's just the beginning because it goes and goes and goes. Find him. Search for him. He's calling out to you in every day, in every activity, in everything you encounter. He's there. Find him.